First contact failures. The Voldari Collective considered itself the apex of galactic civilization. Their conquest algorithm had never failed. Identify resource-rich worlds with primitive technology, establish orbital superiority, deploy suppression fields, and watch as the natives descended into chaos before surrendering. 15 civilizations had fallen this way. Earth would be the 16th. Admiral Nexus stood on the command deck of the Inevitable Dominance, the flagship of the Voldari fleet. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the blue light of tactical displays as his compound eyes studied Earth's rotation. Preliminary assessment complete, Admiral, reported Science Director Vex. Class 3 civilization. Nuclear capabilities but no interplanetary defense grid. Atmosphere rich in oxygen and nitrogen. Abundant water resources. Native population concentrated in urban centers. Nexus clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Perfect. Deploy the suppression grid. Target their communication networks, power distribution, and military installations. I want them blind, deaf, and helpless within the hour. With pleasure, Admiral. Vex's spindly fingers danced across holographic controls. Within moments, hundreds of dark metallic spheres descended toward Earth's atmosphere. They positioned themselves in a perfect geodesic pattern around the planet, pulsing with energy until a web of invisible force connected them. The suppression field activated. Around the globe, power grids failed. Communications networks went silent. Satellites drifted out of alignment. In the war room of the Pentagon, generals watched helplessly as their screens went dark. Admiral Nexus watched with satisfaction as the planet's technological infrastructure collapsed. How long until complete submission based on historical models? Approximately 12 Earth hours, Vex responded. Once the initial panic subsides, they'll realize resistance is futile. Perfect. Prepare landing forces for resource extraction. We begin in 6 hours. The first Voldari landing party descended near Tulsa, Oklahoma. Commander Zix led 20 elite warriors equipped with pulse weapons and neural disruptors. Their sleek ship touched down in a cornfield just before dawn. Remember, Zix instructed his team, these primitives are likely to be disoriented and frightened. Subdue but do not kill unless necessary. The collective prefers intact labor resources. The ship's door hissed open. Zix stepped onto Earth soil, his environmental sensors confirming breathable atmosphere. In the distance, he could see the lights of a farmhouse. An easy first conquest to establish a foothold. 15 minutes later, Zix was sprinting back to the ship, his armor covered in a sticky substance, 3 warriors missing. His panicked transmission to the mothership made little sense. They have explosive powder weapons and something called a shotgun. And the 4-legged creature, they called it a dog. It would not stop. And the wheeled vehicle with the lights. Retreat. Immediate extraction required. Admiral Nexus listened to the report with disbelief. Commander, control yourself. You're saying you were driven back by primitives with projectile weapons. The farmer had something called home security, and neighbors arrived with more weapons. They communicated without technology. They used whistles and something called a ham radio. Nexus turned to Vex, mandibles twitching in irritation. Explain this. The science director looked perplexed. It seems the humans have contingencies for communications failures, and their weapons, while primitive, appear effective against our standard armor. Impossible. Deploy 3 more landing parties. Different continents. Full combat protocols authorized. The second landing party descended near Sydney, Australia. Their cloaked ship settled on a beach, and Captain Krell led his unit toward the city lights. Within 30 minutes, they encountered humans in a coastal neighborhood. Surrender in the name of the Voldari Collective, Krell announced through his translator. A group of humans stared back. Then one stepped forward. Yeah, nah, mate. That's not happening. Before Krell could respond, the humans attacked with a bewildering array of improvised weapons. Garden tools, sports equipment, kitchen implements, One human female immobilized a warrior with something called hairspray, followed by a flaming lighter. Krell's unit retreated in disarray. His report back to the mothership was equally disturbing. They showed no fear. They laughed while attacking. One kept shouting "crikey" while swinging a cricket bat. Another threw boiling water from a device called a kettle. The third and fourth landing parties met similar fates in Brazil and Ukraine. In Brazil, locals turned a street carnival into a coordinated assault using everything from fireworks to cooking oil. In Ukraine, farmers simply towed away the alien landing craft with tractors, while the landing party was conducting reconnaissance. Back on the inevitable dominance, Admiral Nexus called an emergency council. "How is this possible?" he demanded, pacing the command deck. "Their global networks are disabled. Their militaries are cut off from central command. They should be cowering in fear." Vex studied the incoming data with growing concern. "It appears we've miscalculated, Admiral. The humans don't rely on centralized command structures during crisis. They improvise." Improvise. Nexus spat the word like poison. "Yes, and they're remarkably effective at it. Reports indicate they're already adapting to the suppression field. They're using old technology, analog radios, mechanical signals, even something called Morse code, to coordinate resistance." Lieutenant Dex, the fleet's cultural analyst, stepped forward hesitantly. "Admiral, I've been monitoring their historical broadcasts. This species has an unusual psychological profile. They've created countless simulations of alien invasions in their entertainment media." "What are you saying?" Nexus demanded. "They've been preparing for this scenario for generations. Mentally, if not technologically. They have pre-established cultural protocols for exactly this situation." A tactical officer interrupted with fresh alarm. "Admiral, we're detecting launches from the surface. Hundreds of them." "Nuclear missiles?" Nexus asked, mandibles clicking anxiously. "No, sir. They appear to be civilian aircraft, retrofitted with makeshift weapons, and some kind of signal jammers attached to them." Across Earth, humans were fighting back. In Silicon Valley, tech engineers had quickly built signal disruptors targeting the suppression spheres. In rural areas, hunters and farmers formed militia units armed with everything from rifles to repurposed farming equipment. In cities, police and civilian volunteers coordinated evacuation and defense operations using paper maps and bicycle messengers. The suppression grid, designed to create chaos by removing technology, had instead forced humans to rely on their most dangerous quality: adaptability. Admiral Nexus watched in horror as the tactical display showed hundreds of suppression spheres going dark. Somehow, the humans were disabling them, sometimes with military jets, sometimes with civilian drones carrying explosive payloads, and in some cases, with nothing more sophisticated than well-aimed hunting rifles. "Impossible," he whispered as reports flooded in of Voldari forces retreating from multiple landing zones. In Detroit, auto workers had converted assembly lines to produce makeshift armor and weapons. In Mumbai, locals had overwhelmed the Voldari unit with sheer numbers and improvised traps. In Tokyo, a group of engineers had already partially reverse-engineered a damaged Voldari shuttle. "Admiral," Vex said quietly, "I recommend immediate tactical withdrawal." Nexus turned to his science director, eyes burning with rage. "We cannot retreat from primitives. These primitives have disabled 40% of our suppression grid in less than 12 hours, Vex replied. "And they're learning. Each encounter makes them more effective against us." Lieutenant Dex looked up from his data streams. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their global communication patterns. Before we arrived, they were divided. Thousands of nations, languages, factions. But now what?" Nexus demanded. "Now they're uniting. Against us. It's like we've given them a common enemy that transcends their differences." Outside the viewports of the inevitable dominance, Earth continued its serene rotation, appearing deceptively peaceful from orbit. But across its surface, Humanity was mobilizing in a way the Volderi had never anticipated, not as a terrified, disorganized mob, but as a resourceful, determined, and increasingly coordinated resistance. Admiral Nexus stared at the tactical displays showing yet more suppression spheres going offline. For the first time in his distinguished military career, he felt something unfamiliar: doubt. The unconventional counterattack. By the third day of the invasion, the Volderi Collective's suppression grid had collapsed entirely. Admiral Nexus stood rigid before the command viewport, his compound eyes fixed on the blue-green planet below. The inevitable dominance had moved to a higher orbit. A tactical retreat, he called it, though Science Director Vex had the decency not to contradict him. Final casualty assessment, Nexus demanded, mandibles clicking nervously. Lieutenant Dex consulted his datapad. 327 warriors lost, 42 scout ships destroyed or captured, 83 suppression spheres disabled, 17 landing zones overrun. And the humans? Difficult to determine precisely, Vex interjected. Their casualty reporting is inconsistent, but significantly fewer than projected. They've developed effective countermeasures against our weapons with remarkable speed. Nexus turned away from Earth's mocking beauty. Explain how this happened, Director. Your assessment guaranteed an easy conquest. Vex's antennae drooped. I made a critical error in my analysis, Admiral. I categorized humans as a Class 3 civilization based on their technology level, but failed to account for their behavioral adaptability. They don't follow predicted response patterns. In what way? Lieutenant Dex stepped forward, data streaming across his tablet. When faced with a superior force, most species either organize a centralized resistance or fragment into uncoordinated groups. Humans do neither, and both simultaneously. On the main view screen, footage from Earth showed the chaos of human resistance. In New York, civilians had transformed a department store into a command center. In Rio de Janeiro, street gangs and police fought side by side against Volderi scouts. In Seoul, high school students had hacked into the Volderi communications frequency and were broadcasting what humans called death metal music interspersed with tactical disinformation. They have no unified strategy, Dex continued, yet somehow their disparate efforts complement each other. It's as if each human operates independently while instinctively contributing to collective action. Tactical Officer Krev approached with fresh reports. Admiral, we're detecting unusual activity in orbit. The humans are repositioning their space stations and satellites. Weapons platforms? Nexus asked, hope briefly rising that he might face a conventional threat. No, sir. They appear to be creating communication relays. They're establishing an orbital network to bypass our remaining suppression nodes. In orbit around Earth, astronauts from multiple nations were conducting emergency spacewalks, repositioning satellites, and connecting makeshift transmitters to the International Space Station. On the ground, amateur radio operators had established global communication networks that the Volderi couldn't track or jam. Information flowed freely between continents. Technological weaknesses of Volderi armor, effective improvised weapons, tactics that worked against their formations. Admiral, Vex said gravely, I've been analyzing their historical records. This species has a disturbing pattern. When facing existential threats, they demonstrate extreme psychological resilience and technological innovation. Their documented wars against themselves show cognitive and adaptive capabilities that exceed anything in our database. You're saying they're more dangerous because they've been killing each other for millennia? Nexus asked incredulously. Precisely. They've developed an entire cultural framework around asymmetric warfare. Their entertainment, their mythology, even their educational systems celebrate resistance against overwhelming odds. On the tactical display, new alerts flashed as Volderi landing parties reported ambushes worldwide. In Canada, trappers had modified hunting snares to capture Volderi scouts. In Kenya, wildlife rangers were tracking alien units using techniques developed for anti-poaching operations. In Vietnam, elderly villagers had repurposed half-century-old guerrilla tactics with devastating effectiveness. "Sir," Krev reported, eyes wide with alarm, "we're detecting launches from multiple locations, thousands of them." "Nuclear strikes?" Nexus asked, mandibles clicking rapidly. "No, Admiral. They're small, individually harmless, but there are so many." Across Earth, humans had launched everything that could fly. Commercial drones carrying signal jammers, weather balloons with electromagnetic pulse devices cobbled together in high school science labs, crop dusters spraying chemicals that adhered to Volderi optical systems, even paper lanterns carrying lightweight incendiary devices designed to float into Volderi ships' air intakes. None of these posed a serious threat individually, but there were thousands coming from all directions, overwhelming the Volderi defense algorithms designed to counter organized military assaults. Meanwhile, in secret facilities worldwide, human scientists worked feverishly to reverse engineer captured Volderi technology. In a basement lab at MIT, quantum physicists had already identified the principles behind the suppression field. In Bangalore, software engineers were decoding Volderi navigation systems. In Moscow, materials scientists were analyzing the alien alloys, seeking weaknesses. Admiral Nexus stared at the tactical display in disbelief as more Volderi units reported retreat or capture. How are they coordinating these attacks without centralized command? Lieutenant Dex looked up from a human broadcast he'd been monitoring. "Admiral, I believe I understand now. Their popular entertainment, movies, they call them, has trained them for this scenario. They share common narratives about alien invasions. When we arrived, they'd recognized the pattern and knew instinctively how to respond. They were prepared for us because they imagined us." Nexus asked incredulously. "Yes, Admiral, and not just that. They've imagined defeating us in countless ways. Their fiction explored possibilities that are now becoming reality." The command deck fell silent as the implications sank in. The Volderi had encountered many species in their conquests, but never one that had mentally rehearsed its resistance through collective storytelling. Science Director Vex approached Nexus, voice lowered. "Admiral, I must formally recommend complete withdrawal from this system. Retreat." "The Collective has never retreated," Nexus hissed. "The Collective has never encountered humans," Vex replied simply. "Our models project total mission failure within 7 standard days if we remain. The longer we stay, the more of our technology they capture and reverse engineer." As if to emphasize his point, alarms blared across the command deck. Tactical Officer Krev rushed to his station. "Admiral, 3 of our scout ships are returning to dock." "What's the emergency?" Nexus demanded. "The emergency, sir, is that we didn't send those ships out. The humans have captured them, deciphered the controls, and are flying them back to us. They're loaded with what appears to be fertilizer and fuel." Nexus stared at the approaching scout ships on the display. "Improvised explosives, inside our own vessels." "Yes, Admiral, and our automated defense systems recognize them as friendly craft." Nexus's mandibles clicked rapidly in distress. "Override. Destroy those ships." The inevitable dominance shuddered as its weapons systems destroyed the incoming vessels just barely outside the blast radius. Debris scattered across the ship's shields, a symbolic rain of Volderi defeat. In the silence that followed, Admiral Nexus made his decision. Prepare for immediate withdrawal. All ships, full retreat. As the Volderi fleet disengaged from Earth orbit, Nexus stood alone at the viewport, watching the blue planet recede. Lieutenant Dex approached cautiously. "Admiral, should I list Earth as a Class 4 civilization in our records?" Nexus was silent for a long moment. "No, Lieutenant. Create a new classification. Class A. Age. Admiral." "For human," Nexus replied, "and mark this system with our highest danger warning. The Collective must never return here." As the inevitable dominance prepared for faster-than-light departure, its sensors detected a final transmission from Earth, broadcasting on all frequencies, in perfect Volderi language. You're welcome to come back when you're ready to trade instead of conquer. Until then, remember what you learned here today. Beneath the message was a curious symbol that Volderi translators identified as a smiley face. The ultimate insult. The humans weren't even afraid. As the stars stretched into lines around the retreating fleet, Admiral Nexus understood with terrible clarity that the collective had not just failed to conquer Earth, they had awakened it. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Voldari collective, Earth would receive a new designation in their records. Do not approach. Contains humans. /